Okay, we're going to get started here today. Good morning. My name is Barbara Velasquez. As Metropolitan Community College's coordinator of International Intercultural Education, it is my great pleasure to welcome you to Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month programming. Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month, also known as AAPI, is an annual celebration that recognizes the historical and cultural contributions of individuals and groups of Asian and Pacific Islander descent to the United States. This includes cultures from the entire Asian continent, including East, Southeast, and South Asia, and the Pacific Islands of Melanesia, Micronesia, and Polynesia. As of the 2020 US Census, this numbered about 20.6 million people, or about 7% of the total US population. Audience members, your microphones and chat with other audience members is shut down. At any time, you may communicate with the hosts. Please send your questions for our speaker to moderator Barbara Velasquez. Today, thanks to the opportunity to connect electronically, we have the honor of hearing from Shehlah Sinan, presenting to us from her home country of Pakistan. Shehlah holds a master's in business administration and another in international relations. She has been a student of history and religion for 10 years under various teachers. Currently, she's a homeschooling mom and the wife of Indian classical musician Asif Sinan, who has presented in person and virtually at Metropolitan Community College's annual international fair. So please welcome Shehlah Sinan.
Thank you so much. And assalamu alaikum to everybody. Alhamdulillah. I'm really honored to be speaking to all of you today. And my apologies in advance if I talk about some things that you're already aware of. And everything that I'm going to be talking about today, I owe it to my teachers. And hence, anything that touches your heart or appeals to you is all to the blessings of my teachers. And if I make any mistakes, which I'm bound to make, all the mistakes are completely mine. And I take ownership of all the mistakes and I apologize for it in advance. So let's start at the beginning, the very beginning. And we begin with, so I'm going to be talking about music in the Muslim lands in the beginning, how music has spread until where has it spread, and its influences and the people who influenced it. And then we will move to South Asia, where we will be talking about just one genre of South Asian music, which is known as Qawwali. So we'll go to the next slide, please. So we begin at the beginning, and we begin with what makes us Muslims. So the foundational text is the Quran. And that essentially belief in the Quran and whatever the Quran says to us is what makes us Muslim, because Quran is directly God's word, and it has lived through all these centuries unchanged. So it's unchanged God's word, and therefore just submission to his word and submission, therefore, to all God's principles is what makes us Muslims. We'll move ahead. Sorry, I'm not controlling the PowerPoint. So just an image of the Quran and what it looks like, and we might come back to take a look at it, and then we'll move forward. Okay, so let's talk about what exactly is the Quran concerned with. Now, contrary to popular information or popular belief, the Quran is yes, 10% of it is concerned about laws, what in Arabic is known as the Sharia. It just means laws. What about the other 90%? What really is the Quran's concern? So there are stories of the prophets, and there are advices that are given to us that all center around these core um, four core not I'm sorry, my English is not very good. The four core dimensions of a person. Okay, so first of all, we have what is known as the aql, or the intellect, and then there is the qalb, or the heart, and then there is the ruh, which is the spirit, and the nafs, which is the self. The entire Quran is guiding us on how to think, why should we think, what should we think with, and why is it important to think, and how does this connect to the spirit. So just to give you a very short sort of definition of each. So the intellect is, its Western counterpart would be the cognition. So intellect, or aql, or cognition, as it would be known in the West. And the interesting thing is that in the Western academia, the cognition pretty much is, right there in the hierarchy. Rational thinking, cognition is what matters the most. But in the Quran and in our Eastern thought, the qalb is extremely important. The qalb meaning the heart. In fact, the Quran uses the phrase and it says, do you not have hearts to think with? Or do they not have hearts to understand with? Now, this is very interesting because the Quran is alluding that the heart can think. And I think if we just sort of think about our own languages, and I feel that all languages are divine, we also say, my heart doesn't agree to this, or you would say, I know this by heart, right? So there is this spiritual sense even in the English language that the heart can think. And if I'm not mistaken, I think it was in the 90s that there was some research that said that the heart has its own set of neurons, 40,000 neurons, and it can do and it can think independently of the brain. So I just find this extremely interesting. Anyways, so the nafs is the self, or the Western counterpart would be the ego. And the ruh is the spirit that God breathed into all of us. So the Quran is completely occupied, or is asking us again and again to use the intellect, to think with the heart, to curb yourself, and to curb, or at least try to ascend your personal self, so that you can reach the spirit, or so that you can reach that pure level at which you were born with. So when you were born, you were at a stage called fitra, which is absolutely absolutely the purest of existence. So so we have to spend all our lives trying to connect with the spirit. And I'll let you know as we go on during this conversation how this connects to music. So please bear with me. And the next slide is the 3 dimensions of Islam. Oh, I think this is the older slide, probably. I think it will be the one after this. If you can just go a bit ahead, please. Oh, yeah, that's the one. So, so we are concerned with with three things. We're concerned with Islam, we're concerned with Iman. Islam, we believe in Islam, in the five prayers, in fasting. We believe in Iman, we believe in the angels, we believe in all the prophets, we believe in the Quran. But the one I want to really focus on is ihsan, which over here it says virtue, but it really means excellence. So for a Muslim, you not only have to submit to the will of God, believe in the angels, the book, the final days, but whatever you do has to be done with excellence. And this third dimension is extremely important, because that really was the reason that we had almost from the 7th century till almost till the 15th century, 8 to 900 years of uninterrupted, what is known as the golden age of Islam, which had direct impact on the Renaissance, and was able to revive a lot of wisdom that was already lost, and we'll cover that as well. And so it's the age of spectacular buildings, it's the age of a lot of math, it's the age of um, it's the age of music. So we'll come to that. So let's just keep in mind that the Quran teaches us to take care of our egos, to take care of our hearts, to keep polishing our hearts. And at the same time, we as Muslims have to, whatever we're doing, whether I'm a comb maker or I'm a mom, whatever work that I'm doing has to be done with excellence. Now we'll see the geography of what is known as the Middle World. I think it's a slide before it. The slides got a little mixed up. So thank you so much. So I want you to see the geography of the Middle World, and this word Middle World was coined by a scholar called Tamim Ansari, and I will recommend his book. It's called Destiny Interrupted. And so this is just to show you, on one hand, you can see the Mediterranean, and you can see these are basically trading routes, and you can see where the Muslims were trading. And thanks to the trading routes, they were influencing Southern Europe. Ultimately, they also ruled entire Spain. And from Spain, the influence went all the way up to England. The Muslims also ruled in Northern Africa. The Muslims ruled in Asia Minor. And at the same time, if you look at the other map, it shows the influence going all the way to Western China. So this is a very interesting place that the Muslims are at in the 7th century. So they come out of the Hijaz, or the Mecca and Medina, which are actually quite south in modern day Saudi Arabia, and they kind of spread outwards, and they spread to both the east and the west. And the Arabs were essentially traders as is, and they used to trade a lot with Northern Africa in any case, and with India. So it was not very surprising that this is where, this is exactly the route they followed when they went into expansion. Now, it just so happens that around the same 7th century, the Byzantines are not as strong as they used to be. The Persians are not as strong as they used to be, and they gradually succumb to the expanding Muslim influence. So just to keep the Middle World, I just wanted to share this with you so that you'd have a sense of how global Islam was at its time. Okay, and we'll come back to it and how it has influenced everything else. So I want to talk about pluralism. Okay, and so it is very interesting that when um, one always thinks that, oh, there were all these warriors and they went into all these countries and they killed people and they asked them to convert to Islam. Well, actually, that's not really how it happened, because the Muslims really recognized a lot of religions. Islam recognizes Christians as people of the book. It recognizes Jews as people of the book, and there were Nestorian Christians and there were Jews. So all these people really existed in the geography around Saudi Arabia. In fact, they were in Medina as well, where the Prophet is buried. It was populated by Jews. So Islam has always been a very pluralistic society, contrary to popular opinion. And one of the examples that I can give you of how pluralistic it was is that a translation movement took place. So in present day Baghdad in Iraq, which is east of present day Saudi Arabia, there was a house of wisdom, Baitul Hikmah, which was set up by one of the Muslim rulers. And what he did was that he set forth what is known as the translation movement. And let's just see a picture of that, please. It's in the next slide. So this is very interesting. The translation movement, what did it do? Now you have to understand that the Arabs owe a lot to Persians and to Nestorian Christians and to everybody else, because what the Arabs knew was very limited. But what the other faiths knew about the world was far greater than what the Arabs knew, because the Arabs essentially came from an oral tradition. They were not from a written tradition. The Quran was the first written book of the Arabs. So what was needed was, I mean, these were now new Muslims who were hungry for a lot of intellect, because that is what the Quran was teaching them. The Quran was constantly telling them that you have to think, you have to use your intellect. Do you not reflect? Do you not think about this? Do you not think about the stars? Do you not think about the lands? Do you not think about the mountains? So what happened was that one of the dynasties, the Abbasids in Iraq, they set up what is known as the House of Wisdom, and they began a translation movement. What happened was that all these lost books of the time, which were essentially Greek Hellenistic books, were being brought into the House of Wisdom. Syriac books written in Aramaic language, Syriac language, they were all being brought into the House of Wisdom, and they were being translated. And they were being translated with people of all faiths. In fact, one of the greatest chief librarian of the Baitul Hikmah was a Nestorian Christian by the name of Hunayn. So this is like an intense movement of translation which is happening in the 8th century, okay, in the late 7th century and the 8th century. And let's see what happens after that. So we can actually see a picture of the modern day Baitul Hikmah as well. Unfortunately, this place was destroyed in the Iraqi invasion in 2003, but just to let you know that what was happening. Now, as a result of these intense translation movement that carried on for nearly 200 years, and we'll go to the next slide, what the Muslims learned from the Greeks was the classical liberal arts education, where the trivium and the quadrivium were the most important of subjects that you could study. And it appealed to the Muslims. And it appealed to the Muslims because the trivium, which basically focuses on the language arts, was very essential to the Muslims in any case, because we believe that we are the only as human beings, we have two distinctive gifts from God. One is the ability to speak, and one is the ability to stand up straight and walk on two legs. So just the ability to think, to vocalize, to talk, all of this really appealed um, to the scholars, to the Islamic scholars of the time. And then the whole concept of the art of numbers, the science of numbers, what do numbers represent, and how are numbers connected to geometry, and how are numbers connected to music. So actually music is sort of music actually subsumes a lot of the numbers, a lot of the arithmetic. And then ultimately, the ultimate art was that of astronomy. And it's very interesting that even today, we tend to look up to scientists as being ultimately the ultimate intellects in our scholarship universe. And if you were to, for example, and you were to ask a physicist that what for you would be the ultimate intellectual degree that you would like to go to, and he would probably say astrophysics or study of the universe. And it's beautiful that even back then, cosmology was the highest of the arts. But today, the subject that we are dealing with is music. So the Muslims intrinsically recognized how important music is, especially as a branch of arithmetic. And there is a schema of sound within the Quran itself. And that is why I mentioned the Quran earlier. So the Quran has a rhythmic structure, and the Quran has melody to it as well. And the melody is provided by the human beings, whereas the rhythmic structure is fixed. But as my musician husband would always argue, that rhythm and melody are really two sides of the same coin, because melody in a different rhythmic structure would just sound like another melody. So in the Quran, for example, we have a rhythmic structure of ones, of twos, of threes, of fours, and sixes. And there is also a recognition. Every alphabet in the Quran has a very unique vocalization. So Muslims or the Islamic scholars of the time were already attuned to the concept of sound, which is, of course, a concept of which is included in the concept of music. And then there was a recognition of melody as well. So, for example, in the Islamic lands, the call for prayer would be given 5 times a day, but not the call to prayer was the same, but the melody would change. So the call to prayer in the morning, the melody of that would be different from the call to prayer in the afternoon and in the evening and at sunset or at night. In the morning, it would be more sonorous. It would help you to wake up. It would encourage you to walk to the mosque and say your prayers. So there was already a recognition of melody also. And the 3 words that I've written here are maqam. So in Arabic, the recognition of the melody is called maqam, and it is called rag or ragas in the Hindi language or the Urdu language, and it's called scales in the Western language. So we really are talking about the same thing. So let's kind of move forward. So I want to talk a little bit more about the 8th and the 9th century onwards. So now that we know that there is this innate recognition of music and a scholarly recognition of music by Muslims in the Muslim lands in the 8th and 9th century, thanks to the foundational text, which is the Quran, and thanks to the translation movement at the House of Wisdom. The House of Wisdom, by the way, continued till the 12th century. So let's see what happened, at least in the world of music. Like, who are these people who influenced music and how groundbreaking was their work? So we'll go to the next slide and we'll first talk about this person called Ziryab. Okay, Ziryab means black crow or a black bird, not necessarily a crow. And I think it was a reference to probably his skin tone or for whatever reason. So Ziryab is a very interesting person because he's a result of that House of Wisdom as well. Now he is studying in Baghdad, which houses the House of Wisdom, and there are these, thousands of scholars who are there, and these scholars have come from all over the world. They have come from India, they have come from Northern Africa, they have come from Southern Europe, and they're there to study, and they're bringing all these Hellenistic books. So Ziryab not only just is a known figure for music, but Ziryab is studying with all these scholars. He's studying not just music, but he's studying logic. He's studying all the trivium and quadrivium subjects. And I will invite all of you if you're interested, to probably just Google famous Islamic scholars of the golden age of Islam, and just pick a random, just pick any random name and Google that random name, go to their Wikipedia, and I can bet you 99% of the time you will find them as experts or polymaths in all the triviums and the quadriviums. So these people were not just limited to a particular subject, or as one of my teachers one day very interestingly said that unfortunately today's specialization means we learn more and more about less and less. Well, that was not the worldview of the Islamic scholars or the Muslim scholars. Everything was connected, everything was interconnected, just like the ruh and the qalb and the nafs, and you're connected to God. So everything was really one. And that is why the idea was to join the dots of this cosmos. So Ziryab is a very interesting person. He actually moved from Iraq, and he moved all the way to Spain, where there was another Muslim dynasty over there. And here he establishes the first school of music. And he's a brilliant person. He also adds the fifth string to the lute, or the oud as it's called. And if you look closely to the PowerPoint presentation, you will see a black bird sitting on a lute. And why did he add the fifth string? So it's very important. So it's very interesting that the four strings actually represent the four Aristotelian humors. And Ziryab, and some people say that Al-Kindi was the one who added the fifth string, so we'll let that be. But the fifth string actually represents the ruh, the spirit. So he is actually converting a simple instrument into an instrument that connects to the divine. And I just want to take a minute and sort of reflect on the spirituality of music. Now, usually all the arts have a material attached to it, right? But it's very interesting that music, even when produced, is not material. You can't touch it. You can just hear it, right? And it's very interesting that the word used to produce music is called instrument, because that is what an instrument does. A knife helps you to cut vegetables, right? But and it's all these various instruments that help you produce music. And And what should a music do? What should music do? We'll come to that later. And I want to also talk about Al-Farabi. Al-Farabi has written probably the greatest, biggest book on music, which has just started to be translated as we speak. It is called Al-Kitab Al-Mawsiki Al-Kubra or Al-Kibriya, which is the great book of music. Okay, and this great book of music covers everything that you can possibly think of about music. So Al-Farabi again is this amazing polymath who understands physics, who understands philosophy, who has written treatises on politics, and yet he writes one of the greatest books on music. And then I want to talk about Ibn Sina. So Ziryab is somebody who's there in the 8th century. Al-Farabi is somebody who's there in the 9th century. Again, these are all people coming out of this great translation movement. And Ibn Sina really is the last person I'm going to mention today, because he is more known in the West as Avicenna, and he is really the father of modern medicine, and he's recognized as the father of modern medicine by the West as well. And he wrote this book on so there is this one book which he wrote totally on medicine and on and then he wrote another book on psychotherapy, on healing. And the book on healing is actually much more voluminous than the book that he wrote on medicine. And this voluminous book on healing, this is where he devotes great number of chapters to music, because he is now teaching us how music is to be used to heal our soul, which is really for Muslims what music should be and is all about. It is to heal our souls. And why do we need to heal our souls? Because that is what the Quran is asking us to do all the time. It's asking us to cleanse our hearts, to contain our egos, and to ascend, to keep ascending. Every day has to be better than the day that just went by. So, so in short, I just mentioned these three figures just so we can recognize the contribution and therefore connect with what I'm going to be talking about later. So now let's move from the West all the way to South Asia. And let's look at what was South Asia like in terms of music. Well, South Asia, or the Greater India, was immersed in music because it was immersed in the remembrance of the divine, because they had their own devotional books, and these devotional books were read, or rather they were sung in temples. And these devotions were made to various gods, and they were sung in temples, and it was a practice that had been going on for probably more than 3,000 years. So this is what South Asia looked like when Muslims started to enter into South Asia, other than just for trading. So now Muslims are coming to South Asia, they're getting assimilated into South Asia, and they start noticing some things. So one of the first things they notice is that due to the unfortunate caste system that exists in India, the lowest castes were not allowed to listen to devotional songs in the temples. And that is what made a very big population of India very sad. And as keepers or as healers of the heart, the Muslims entered the space and created the space for devotional poetry. And this devotional poetry was obviously um, this devotional poetry was for the one God that we believe in, just for the one God, and not for the myriad of gods that that the greater India used to believe in, but just to one true God. And that is what really attracted these disenfranchised people who were not even being allowed to listen to devotional music. And this gradually became what is known as the Qawwali. And we will go on to the next slide with that. So what is Qawwali? Qawwali really is talking to the qalb, or the heart. And, and where does and the word Qawwali comes from the Arabic word call, which means to speak. And so there were a lot of poets, a lot of scholars who were writing devotional poetry to heal people's hearts of that time in South Asia. And of course, there was melody when they read out those poems. And it was happening all over India in various places of greater India. And the person who's most attributed with as being the founder of Qawwali as we know it today is Amir Khusro. And Amir Khusro is really the student of a master, of what we would call a Sufi master, but he was a great theologian who is known as Hazrat Nizamuddin. Now, it's interesting that Hazrat Nizamuddin also comes from the greater Baghdad, Asia Minor area. And his family is coming from there because now it is the 13th century. The Mongols essentially invaded the Baghdad, and they just destroyed everything over there. And a lot of Muslim families spread out from that house of wisdom, or from that city that was housing so many scholars all over the world. So in fact, in the West, you have, due to the same reasons, you have Jalaluddin Rumi who goes to Turkey. And then over here in the East, you have Hazrat Nizamuddin Aulia, who is coming all the way to India. And again, don't forget the master scholastic achievements these people have, the great intellectual capacity these people have, the rigorous environment, the rigorous scholarly environment that they come from. So you have to keep all of that at the back of your mind. And then Hazrat Nizamuddin Aulia's star pupil is Amir Khusro. And what Amir Khusro does, and again, Amir Khusro, once again, we must remember, I mean, these are people trained in trivium and quadrivium. The master passes on all his intellect, or everything, all his knowledge to his student. And what the student now does is that he sort of takes all the Qawwali forms and he crystallizes them completely. And how does he do that? So he sets the rules for Qawwali. So the first rule is that Qawwali is going to be a purely devotional readings, devotional melodic readings dedicated to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to one true God, or the Prophet, or his family. And by doing this, you are helping people who are listening to all of this learn important theological issues. You're helping them remember what the Prophet was about. You're helping them remember what his teachings were. You are helping them remember what his family was like, was what the early Muslims were like. Because these are people of India who've never really, the masses in India who've never really interacted, or who've not who've not traveled to Saudi, who've not traveled to the Hijaz. And therefore, this becomes a very good vehicle to introduce Islamic philosophy to them. And as I said, call means to speak. So in a lot of Qawwalis, direct quotations from what the Prophet said are used as well, or direct commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are used as well. So Amir Khusro really crystallizes what Qawwali should be all about. And if we go to the next slide, we see what a Qawwali ensemble is all about. Oh, sorry, I must talk about the about the spiritual role of the Qawwal. I'm sorry, I missed that. So what is a Qawwal? So Qawwal is somebody who is connecting you to the divine. Now, in the Quran, there is a theme, there is an oft repetitive theme of the earth and the sky, the earth and the sky. Al-Ard is known as the earth, Sama is known as the sky or the heavens. So when you sit down to listen to Qawwali, it is known as Mehfil Sama. The gathering of the listeners is one of the meanings, because Sama also means to listen, and Sama also means the heavens. So it is the gathering of the listeners who have come there to connect to the divine in the heavens, to understand the cosmos, to understand the highest of the scholarly achievements, to understand cosmology. So there are a lot of meanings built into it. So Qawwal really he has a very spiritual role, because he's connecting the masses with the heavens through his melody, and through a specific rhythmic structure, and through the poetry, which is for the divine only. So we'll move on to the next slide. Is it about the ensemble? Yes. So the Qawwali ensemble is fixed. There will be one or two lead vocalists always. There will always be refrain singers, or if I can help you understand it better, chorus singers who clap. And there will always be this instrument called the harmonium, which is a wind instrument. And there will always be percussionists. And because we are talking about South Asia, the South Asian percussions will be used, which is essentially the tabla and the dholak. Now, I'd like to share with you this little video clip that will show you the vocalist, the singers, the harmoniums, and the percussionists. So can we see that video, please?
Alpha number, the creator of Qawwali, Hazrat Amir Khusro, Rahmatullahi. Bismillah.
Okay, should I continue? Okay, so if you noticed that you can see that there is, if we go on to the next slide, in this very short clip, you must have noticed there were two lead vocalists, and they were sitting with harmoniums. They weren't singing in this section. And there was the percussionists, and there were the refrain or the chorus singers who were clapping. Now, Qawwali is gripping, okay? It needs to grip your soul. And that is why it is so rhythmic, and it is bound by Amir Khusro in certain rags or in certain scales. So he has actually recommended 800 years ago which rhythmic structures to be used and which rags to be used to sing Qawwali. And and these are the very rhythmic structures and rags being used to date. So this is a very living tradition, just like a lot of other things in Islam are very living traditions. So is this Qawwali a living tradition? And you must have noticed that it's very rhythmic. It sort of attacks you, it overpowers your soul. And just I'll just go back to something I had mentioned earlier. So when we were talking about the lute and the fifth string being added to it, so the most difficult instrument, or the instrument in you should be most careful with, as taught to us by these great music scholars, are the stringed instruments, because they have the most um, effect on us, on our heart, and on how we think, on our heart, essentially. So therefore, not everybody is allowed to use the string instrument. Like, you have to be, in fact, in the music tradition, you can be with a master for 20 years and he may not allow you to even touch his instrument or to play instrument till he thinks your heart is pure enough, or he thinks your heart has been trained or has become pure enough to handle those instruments. So this was just a little aside I wanted to share with you. So in Qawwali, we don't have a string instrument, we have wind instrument and we have a percussion instrument. Can we go on to the next slide? And so if we move on, yes. So as I was mentioning, that even after 800 years, we have this living tradition. And in fact, Amir Khusro personally trained 12 young men, or started training them when they were boys, and trained them in the art of Qawwali. And those 12 students of Amir Khusro later on carried on this tradition, and one of the families from those 12 students actually is in Pakistan, and they are still carrying on this tradition even after 800 years. So 800 years of uninterrupted music tradition, as taught by the great scholars, as taught by his master, who came from the area of the Baitul Hikmah, and who in turn Baitul Hikmah owes so much to the Hellenistic and Greek thought, and to the Christian and Jewish translators who were there. So how beautiful is this world, where everybody just collaborates and works together. And it's only fitting that it should come together in music. So what about Qawwali today? So today, Qawwali is a recognized genre in the West. And in the 70s, Qawwali started making inroads, especially from Pakistan, by the Sabri brothers. And at first, they were limited to the Pakistani and the Indian and basically the South Asian diaspora of the West. And then came the 90s, and you have the great Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan, also from Pakistan, who collaborated with people like Peter Gabriel, Michael Brooks, probably other producers that I don't even know the name of, and brought Qawwali, gave it new life, and introduced it to the West. In fact, the short little clip that you just saw there, so I'm sure you must have noticed the refrain singers, the refrain chorus singers, and the lady on the tabla weren't exactly Pakistani. They were actually Americans. And this is a group called Fana Fillah, which means that you don't exist anymore. Only Allah exists. Okay, this is what they call themselves. So Fana Fillah, being finished and only Allah being present. Again, they want to play that spiritual role of the Qawwal, which is going to connect the masses with the one and only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so hence, now that this genre has been recognized, and I think I've overshot my time by 15 minutes, I'd quickly like to share the video clip, and I'll end over here with a video of a Qawwali, and I hope all of you enjoy it. Thank you so much. And of course, we'll come back for question and answers, but I'd like for you to listen to the clip first. Are we ready with it?
Yeah, I'm queuing it up right now.
Okay, great, fantastic. Thank you so much.
To the audience, many, many thanks to Joe. He's doing a great job with this, so got a lot of pieces here.
I'm sorry, we're not gonna be able to have sound with this video.
Oh, that's okay. Okay, he can't play the sound with the video. That's okay. I think why not just share the clip with everybody, and maybe we can take some questions if there are any.
Okay, would you like me to just play the video silent or just put the link into the chat?
Yeah, I think the idea was to listen to the audio, not so much the video. So is there any way in which we can only listen to the audio?
Yeah, I can, it will take just a second, but I can get it going.
Okay, so
Oh,
while you're
fantastic.
working on that, we can go ahead and we'll get into some questions. And then Joe, you just jump in when you're ready. But Shehlah, I want to thank you so much. The history is really, I think it must be really a new connection that you've given everybody to put all of this together. You went over many, many years to help us understand how important music is in South Asia. So as you explored and learned about what you're doing, to learn about from your instructors, learning about the meanings in the Quran and how that led to music having important features. What impacted you the most? That's the question. What impacted you the most through this study?
So I can't pinpoint one particular moment or a particular phrase. Okay, so a particular phrase did impact me when I read it for the first time, and which was a phrase from the Quran which said that, do you not have hearts to intellect with? And I remember reading this, and that really gripped me. But I think I have grown up in an environment where music was very alive, and I have also grown up in an environment where music was treated as sacred, not as the profane, because any subject matter can be used and misused. So I was very grateful. I'm very grateful to have been brought up in that environment where you accord every subject its proper place, which is a part of ihsan, which is a part of excellence. So it's been a journey, and so I'm sorry I'm not able to give you like that one particular moment, but every day I discover new things and I make new connections. There were so many things that came to me even as I was making this presentation, and I was making mental notes to myself. Oh, I need to explore this. I need to explore that. So it's pursuing excellence every day.
And I think your answer and just learning with you through this last hour is really a demonstration that true learning doesn't come quickly. It's step by step, and it opens the door to more questions. Now I hear that Joe is ready to go. Do I have that right, Joe? I think he's going to be able to show us the last video. Are we good? Thank you, Joe.
This is the great Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan, and singing for a largely Western audience.
Wonderful. I'm thankful that you pointed out that there were women in the previous video who were not from Pakistan or India. So is that acceptable to have women in the group, or was it just allowed because they were Americans?
You mean the lady who was playing the tabla, or in the audience?
No, the one playing the tabla.
Okay, yes. She's an American, and she has learned the tabla from, I think, I'm not too sure, but she has probably learned the tabla both in the US and over here. And traditionally, women would not perform in Qawwali ensembles. In fact, but things have changed of late. So just like string instruments and drums are now a part of Qawwali ensembles, so are female musicians. And so in fact, we have a very big name in Pakistan, Abida Parveen. She is essentially a kalam singer or a Sufi poetry singer, but she uses or she employs a lot of Qawwali principles, like she has the refrain singers and she uses the harmonium, etc. So this is an age of fusion, right? And we all sort of learn from each other, and we are always evolving and growing. So yes, things are changing, and they will keep changing.
Another thing that comes to mind is, how does the perspective on music impact education of children? Is music involved in an educational day?
So generally, I think everybody knows that even 2 years of, and this is not, and these are like scientific studies, that 2 years of learning any instrument can raise your IQ level by anywhere from 10 to 15 points, which is significant, So obviously, learning music has a direct impact on your brain, on your on the left side hemisphere and the right hemisphere connecting, and there's increased firing of neurons when you are learning music. So there is this heightened sense of intellect that and memorization, and there is increased language skills, and there is increased spatial learning, mathematical learning when you do learn music. And in fact, the traditional Muslim intellectuals recognize this. And that is why, as I said, when you will randomly Google people, Muslim scholars, you will always see the word musician or music theorist written with everything else, written with logic and rhetoric and philosophy, etc., because they recognized it. And so obviously it does have a direct impact. Does it have and of course, these are timeless things, right? You just have to employ them. Currently, I think with South Asia, our pursuit is not so much for the liberal arts to make us free, but more for us to learn those sciences that do not make us free and in fact bind us to the materialistic capitalistic societies that have that are all around us and that we've become entrapped in. So yes, to be truly liberated, we'll have to go back to the principles of liberal subjects, and which have been unfortunately been minimized. In fact, I think even in the US, if I'm not mistaken, I hear of funds being slashed or funding being slashed for the essential arts, which includes music. So I think it's affecting everybody everywhere.
Yeah, that's very helpful to know that we are facing some of the same challenges and reminders that we need to, for ourselves and those around us, we need to pursue those activities maybe outside of formal education if it's not going to be provided, but
absolutely
included at the same time.
Absolutely, absolutely. I cannot emphasize that enough. And, it's just 2 years of spending time with an instrument. That is what all kids, I think it's a right, it's just a right. And we should just make sure that it happens with them. And then they can choose whatever subject they want to pursue. And, they have to make a connection with nature. Even if, there is somebody who's skeptical about God himself, surely you cannot be skeptical about nature, right? You cannot be skeptical about the existence of the whole cosmos. You can be skeptical about the creator, but not about the creation, right? And you're only going to grow as a person when you're connected to the creation, and more so if you're connected to the creator. So we have to create those spaces for sure.
Thank you so much. I encourage everybody in the audience to do what you can to explore more on Qawwali. It was really lovely to have the opportunity to not only learn the history, the spiritual connections, the scholarly connections, but also to be able to experience a bit of the music. And I thank you for bringing that to us today. Did you have any final thoughts for our audience, Shehlah?
Actually, you pretty much asked me what I was going to, that we must explore we must explore music. Connection with nature is very important. And I want to mention one last thing. So even when I spoke of the great Muslim scholars who have contributed to music, like Al-Farabi or Ibn Sina or Zaryab, if you now go and just simply Google them, you will realize that music, their contribution to music is one of their smaller contributions. They have contributed to other subjects far more. Okay, so that is what true scholasticism is about, that you should be able to see the oneness and you should be able to see the connection between entire creation. Don't limit yourselves, or don't don't limit yourself to one subject. Don't devote yourself, or don't close yourself at least off from other subjects. For example, my husband teaches music at a hospital, and that's a conventional allopathic university. But through music, they understand that there are other avenues that we cannot shut ourselves from. Just because your doctors doesn't mean that, for example, Chinese medicine doesn't work, or Ayurvedic medicine doesn't work, or there are other there is so much wisdom tradition around us that we need to explore more and more and more and more. And I hope that exploration of music helps to open up these avenues.
Thank you so much. Thank you so very much. Also want to thank our audience. We're nearing the end of the academic year and you are still with us, and we appreciate that. I believe we have an evaluation slide that's up. So that's all, that link is also in the chat. And then finally, I'd like to encourage you that we have 2 very busy weeks coming up, and the next program will be tomorrow. We have a panel that will be in person at the Fort Omaha campus, building 23, room 120 A and B. But if you can't get away, it is also going to be available through Zoom, and there is a link to register for that. So hopefully we'll see many of you tomorrow, and many thanks again to Shehlah for taking her time. We have accomplished connecting across many miles, through many time zones. And
Alhamdulillah.
we're very thankful to have you with us. So thank you to everybody, and thank you to Shehlah and Asif for helping us today.
The honor is all mine. Thank you so much, Barbara, and thank you so much, Joe, for everything. Thank you for the honor.
Okay. Have a good afternoon, everyone, and good evening, Shehlah. All right.
Thank you.